Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. This is episode number 156. My name is Alexander Apricot Pepsi. I'm coming to you from a just legalized the possession of marijuana, Berlin, Germany. And we'll get to that in a moment. And as always, I'm sat digitally across from the number one tenured professor of podcasting down there in Melbourne, Australia. His students love to call him Professor Junior Boost, but on the academic papers of podcasting, you've got to see his name written as
John Maloney.
John Maloney. So nice to see you there in Melbourne, Australia in the evening. It's here.
Thank you.
In Berlin, it's 10 a.m. in the morning. And I am absolutely blazed and baked out of my head because I've been chuffing that marijuana any way I can get it. I wake up, I first have a pipe, and then after my first pipe, I just walk out into the kitchen, and then I have a marijuana brownie, and then after I'm so hungry, I'm so hungry after my brownie, I start just getting the munchies. And then I do a few bucket bongs, and I'm feeling so relaxed here with you on the podcast this morning. Because did you hear the news? Did you know that we had done this?
I did know that. Yeah. Funnily enough, I've just been listening just before the show today to a podcast which briefly mentioned it because it was about the legalization of. Sorry, it was about marijuana generally, but about the kind of increased mainstreaming of marijuana usage, particularly in the US. And I liked it because it just basically debunked some of the ideas that get bandied around a lot by weed experts. Like they basically said, if you try and sequence the different strains of, people sell you something as like Nepali Kush or whatever, and this is like Boston Ivy, and this is Bhutanese poison, and they're just all fucking like it doesn't make any difference. And even the ones that are supposed to be sativa and indica, which is like the two of the main strains, apparently it's just a mess now. Like the people sell these things and they don't have any consistency in what they are, and they also found that the idea that having higher amounts of CBD kind of balances out the THC, also bullshit. So I think I'm looking forward to a mental health collapse in our society.
So we legalized it last week. So the deal is here now in Berlin that as of last week, public consumption is now allowed. So as long as it's not within sight of children or near sports facilities, adults in Germany, it's not just Berlin, it's Germany. Adults in Germany can now carry up to 25 grams of cannabis for their own consumption, and you can just smoke it on the street. And so long as you're not around kids, then it's totally fine. But we're not quite at the stage of the Netherlands where you can go into dispensaries and you can't just buy it off the you can't just buy it in a shop yet. You have to get it through a club. It's so funny, all of this stuff, how you can't just do anything normally. It always has to go through all these weird channels. So at the moment, the way that you buy it is you're allowed to apply to set up a cannabis club, I believe, and then you can have up to 500 members, and then those members can purchase it through the club. It just seems very silly. What's the appetite in Australia like for legalizing possession and public smoking of marijuana?
It's definitely kind of starting to be talked about again, I think, in light of what's happening in other jurisdictions that we kind of look at as comparable to ours. And recently a bunch of politicians came forward and said, I do smoke, or I have smoked.
Really?
So we
Barnaby
which
Joyce.
was quite good, actually.
Barnaby Joyce and Bob Catter.
Bob Catter said, believe it or not, I wake and bake every day And, and the people of Central Queensland might not love to hear that, but that's who I am. I am a follower of Haile Selassie. So, yeah, I think it's not too far off, which will be interesting. I mean, one of the things that, is commented on now in places like New York is it just smells like weed everywhere you go.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? When you and me were there, it was. That's the weediest place I've ever been in my life. I mean,
yeah, it's wild.
It's you smell it a lot here, but New York was like, I was just like, I thought this was the place where people got shit done. I thought this was a place where how are people affording those rents while still just being blazed out of their head all day? Surely you have to be pretty sharp to get the work done to pay your rent.
You'd think so. I mean, I certainly could not do anything useful unless my job was professional eater of stuff out of the freezer. I couldn't really do anything. But now, when you say you have to be out of sight of children, what if you are, let's say you're in that big radio tower up there in Berlin.
Yeah, the Fernsehturm.
And you can see a kid in the distance and you're blazing up.
He's making strong eye contact with you from the ground.
Exactly.
I mean, I wrote to a couple of friends this week and said, I mean, maybe you can tell me about this. I saw that caveat that it's not meant to be around kids, and I just thought I don't recall any other law that I've ever encountered where it says this activity is fine, except if you are near children, you cannot do this. Now, obviously, the way that we manage that with alcohol is that you have like venues where you can
premises.
But that's more about serving alcohol to people. But I mean, even with alcohol, certainly there's never been any rule about not consuming that drug in front of children. There's you can't have a beer in front of a child. Is there laws in Australia?
That's right.
Are there any laws in Australia that say this behavior is totally okay so long as a child can't see you?
Well, leaving aside kind of lewd acts, which would certainly be aggravated by the presence of a child, there's not much. I mean, it has the ring of kind of Victorian era obscenity laws, doesn't it? That like this is an activity that's for adults and it's okay to do it, but it still carries this kind of slightly shameful and, underbelly-esque kind of stigma so that you're not supposed to expose innocent young people to it. I mean, basically I would have thought that's pretty hard to enforce, but, I guess you want to at least discourage it so that people aren't just hitting a bucket bong at their kids' little league game or something.
Yeah.
But,
mind you, I think it would be healthy if that rule also applied to alcohol. Like, it's totally fine to just be like hammering beer in front of your kids from before they can even crawl, and just everybody why is Auntie Jeanette suddenly acting a little bit more silly and goofy? Why is Auntie Jeanette being a little bit more touchy than normal at the Christmas party? Oh, that's
my uncle keeps tussling my hair with a level of enthusiasm that's painful. And why have
they put the music up so loud? Why is everybody fighting? Why is everyone fighting? Oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that, mate.
Just what happens.
Something else I want to talk about, John, is that once again, Don't Praise the Machine somehow seems to have been able to predict the news cycle in a way that is frightening. Now, last week we talked about the Amazon Just Walk Out self-checkouts. This was just last week, I believe.
Yeah.
And I would also like to point out that those Just Walk Out self-checkouts from Amazon from the Amazon Fresh stores. For anybody who missed it, last week we were talking a lot about some of the. Why were we talking about the self checkouts?
Because we were talking about the fact that they had decided to get rid of them in some jurisdictions.
That's right. The self checkouts, the self scanning checkouts at your supermarket. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
That's like next level re-rail, where you've sort of re-railed me from a week ago.
From a self-derailment.
You've re-railed me from 7 days ago, which is just amazing. Now, what were we talking about 7 days ago, John?
Yeah, you were in the middle of a great... Yes, and then you said where it's all going with the kind of unpersoned checkouts, the auto checkouts, the self-checkouts, whatever, they had been working on kind of opaque technology to self-regulate.
That's right.
Purchases.
We didn't know. So I think what's also important to remember here is that last week when we were talking about the Amazon self-checkout, which is the Amazon technology where, unlike a self-checkout at a Woolworths or a Coles or an Aldi or a Costco, where you walk up to the little self-checkout machine and you scan your items in the bagging area and then you enter your card and walk out. The Amazon self-checkout or just walkout was a technology where Amazon Fresh stores, I think they were called, you could just walk in, you would scan your barcode at the door, which said, "I'm Alex, here's my Amazon account." Once you'd scanned your barcode, you could go in, grab as many items off the shelf, put them in your trolley, maybe not even a trolley, maybe just directly into your bag or whatever.
Just grab them,
and walk out, no checkout, which was amazing. Now, the important thing to note here, I looked this up, that technology came out with Amazon and was announced in 2016, and I had not thought about that technology virtually again since last week. So 8 years had gone past, and I was like, oh yeah, there's that Amazon. I remember Amazon did that thing. I wonder if they're still doing it 8 years ago. And then last week, my cousin Sebastian writes me and sends friend of the show, Fots Seb writes me, and there's just an article headline that just says Amazon's just walkout checkout tech was powered by 1,000 Indian workers. And I thought it was an April Fool's joke when he first sent it to me. Yeah. And
had that ring.
And it definitely did have that ring. And then, So from Gizmodo, Amazon is phasing out Amazon is phasing out its checkout-less grocery stores with just walkout technology. Just over half of the Amazon Fresh stores were equipped with Just Walkout. The technology allowed customers to skip the checkout altogether by scanning the QR code. Though it seemed completely automated, Just Walkout relied on more than 1,000 people in India watching and labeling videos to ensure accurate checkouts. The cashiers were simply moved off site and they watched you as you shopped. Just incredible. It's a great story.
That's great.
And we mentioned it last week, just before this news came out.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And one of the things you mentioned was this thing they did where they, with their usual air of kind of, they love a performance, they love a stunt, they love to kind of wow people. They invited all these journalists in and said, go nuts, try to conceal your purchasing, try to hide your, stealing of a steak with your jacket or whatever. And everyone was like, we don't know how they're doing it, but it's amazing because none of us could get away with stealing. And it's just a total kind of Potemkin village where they made it seem like it was this technology feat. But it's actually just a bunch of underpaid, classic Amazon, bunch of underpaid workers in a developing country offsite.
It reminds me of that Simpsons episode. Is it where Lenny and Carl go into the cafeteria in the power plant and there's donuts rotating under a glue glass display case? And Lenny, I think, says, I wonder how they make the thing, how they make the donuts turn.
That's exactly what it is.
and then it zooms down, and is it Homer that they're forcing to? So there's a human. It might be Homer. I forget. There's like humans being forced to turn the
From memory,
wheel that
there's like a
turns the
guy
donut display.
whipping them.
Yes.
And yeah, and he goes, "How do they make the cake turn?" And whoever he's talking to just goes, "I don't know, who cares?" And then it's like this underground dungeon. It reminded me of the old. I mean, one of the technologies that's now very old and hasn't really come back into style, but has weird overlaps with some of the stuff that's coming in, is the kind of 1950s automat, which was, the
little
go into the cafe and you'd have little glass display cabinets with different meals in them, and you put your change into the slot, and then the glass would open and you pull your meal out. You couldn't really see, except for the people apparently who would dispense change, who would sit in a little booth. You couldn't really see any staff, but on the other side of these kind of walls of cabinets, there were people hard at work, obviously preparing the meals, taking the dirty dishes and all that sort of thing, but they all remained hidden from view. And now Amazon have basically recreated that, except with the fabrication that they're doing something other than just throwing a massive labor force at it.
So good.
And they've done, the great thing is, it's like, so rather than just pay 5 people a standard minimum wage to kind of check groceries out, you've employed like 1,000 people.
Yeah, 1,000 people that are having no interaction with the customer, no face-to-face, no face-to-face exchange, where both parties, both the cashier and the human, would be having some type of, albeit brief and perhaps surface level connection. Instead, you just gone, we just want 1,000 people in India getting paid $1 an hour to just stare at screens and record what's going on.
Has this story been picked up by a lot of places? Yeah,
it was picked up by a lot of places, and I also loved that. I loved that so Gizmodo's headline was, I think they were one of the first to report on it, and their headline was, "Amazon is phasing out its checkoutless grocery stores with just walkout technology." And then all the people who were making headlines for their clickbait articles, who are much better at this, changed it so that all of the headlines started suddenly reading, "Amazon's just walkout checkout tech was powered by 1,000 Indian workers," which is much more clickable. That's the one that I saw.
Totally. Yeah, the first one is more the one that was probably on Amazon's press release.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the Bezos one. And then everybody who's like, fuck Bezos, or anybody who's got a gripe against Amazon was just like, "Amazon's just checkout tech powered by 1,000 Indian workers." You could take it another level and be like, "Disgraced Amazon shuts down just walk out using slave labor Indian drone workforce."
Secret drone workforce bankrolled Bezos's steroid regime.
and his increasing level of facial ploofs. Bezos level 5 ploofing paid for by 1,000 Indian workers. He's got a beautiful worm head. Amazon, Lord Amazon, as he's known to me. He's had the kind of work done on his head, and because he's a bald man, that he's got a very worm-like head. Lord Amazon.
Yeah, because it's kind of it's the subtle creases of a worm, because they would have been deeper creases, but he's had them ploofed.
That's right.
So they're little ripples in his skin, much like you would see on the surface of an earthworm's
and he's all epidermis. And he's all buff too, because he's gone from being milk toast 90s Silicon Valley nerd to now he's
just a real weedy kind of. He's still deeply uncharismatic in my view, but they all are, those guys.
And now he's buff worm. Like there was that game on, I don't know if it was all platforms. There was a video game in the 90s that was called like Wild Worms, and they were like buff with a worm head. People out there are going to know what this is for sure, and it's it's on the cover of a SNES box. I can remember. Maybe it was called Worms, and they were like
I used to play Worms.
buff-looking soldiers with a worm head, and that's Bezos. That's baby Bezos.
We got to put that meme out before anyone else thinks of it. That's great.
True. I have to put it out before the episode comes out. Now, John, I'm just trying to think what kind of segue I can use here. Now, John, speaking of Jeff Bezos, speaking of worms, speaking of buff, speaking of self-checkouts, buff worms might be good.
That's self-checkout's not a bad one.
Nobody's going to get this until you start.
No, totally. Well, let me start this way, Al, and viewers and listeners. If you received this text message, what would you think? It says this. This is a text message I received a couple of weeks ago. John to present at Sydney CBD Clinic. Our address is in the signature box below. To reception at 8 a.m. on Friday, 29th of the 3rd, 2024, to produce fresh sperm sample. I like that they've used the adjective fresh there. Remind John to have his last ejaculation Tuesday or Wednesday, then abstain until Friday morning. I like that. So that's the text that really begins the story of the most expensive masturbatory episode of my life. I had a few months ago shared a story of having my boys, if you like, tested in preparation for kind of thinking about going down that path with Jacinta, the baby path. And that in itself was a kind of weird and wonderful experience. And so this was the next phase, I guess. It was a process of actually, well, it was the kind of moment of truth where my boys were tested. They were found to be some of the strongest they'd ever seen.
That is true, isn't it? They did say that is true, that you were pretty healthy boys.
Yeah, they were fine. They were healthy. They didn't say they didn't give me like a certificate or anything.
They didn't show you
have any problems.
They didn't show you the ladder and said you've made the finals. You're in the top 8.
Yeah, they put my sperm into a little vault in case they ever needed to restart humanity.
Or they've got you on one of they put your name in chalk on a board like they do at pubs with people who've drunk loads of Guinness or something like that.
Yeah.
Sort of drinking challenge.
They said, look, they said there's been a lab leak and one of the nurses got accidentally pregnant just from being in the same room as it. And the weird thing is it was a male nurse, so they don't even know how it happened, junior style. But anyway, that was all fine. Then we progressed. I won't kind of go into the weeds of this very complicated medical process, but essentially some eggs were shipped from the US to Sydney, and then I flew up to Sydney. And it's all pretty time sensitive, so I thought it was kind of going to be 3 or 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden it was 3 or 4 days that we had to act because they were defrosting these little eggs, and I had to go up to Sydney, spend the night in. Shout out to the good people at Quest at Sydney Airport. It's a beautiful, beautiful environment in which to prepare for the giving of life. I had flashbacks to, you might remember when we were growing up in Adelaide, there was an Adelaide Airport motel and lounge ad, and I remember the theme song went shoo-ba-ba-da-doo-dip, shoo-ba-ba-da-doo-doo, and it was all, the ad was kind of deliberately designed to make it seem like it was somewhere that you might have an illicit liaison, which seems very off color to me now. It's like if you're having an affair, then go to do it at the airport motel.
Yeah, or if you if you need to take a prostitute somewhere. But perhaps it's because they knew their market, and so they just said, look, we all know why people come here. We know that about 7% of our guests are actually have actually got brief stopovers before their
business travelers.
Travelers. We know that 93% of you are either having an affair or are bringing a prostitute here. So the ad will speak to you.
Just living in, what is it, Airport West or whatever.
Suburb, the famous suburb of Airport West.
Yeah, exactly. Nipping across for an illicit liaison. So that was the vibe. And it was funny because I guess in the lead up, I told quite a few people because I find the whole thing kind of amusing and I find it quite therapeutic to talk about it as I do on the show. And then, of course, you think, well, a lot of people know now that I'm doing this, which I didn't really think through. And I'm flying all the way up to Sydney. And what if I can't do it? Like I just wasted all this money on airfares and a hotel. So it was a strange bit of performance anxiety I found in the lead up. And I was doing things like I abstained from alcohol for the week beforehand. And I also ate a beef burrito the night before because I thought maybe a big injection of protein would help. So I was just alone in this weird airport hotel eating a beef burrito thinking, I hope this does the trick. And then the next morning I went down to the lab and it was Good Friday actually. So it was a kind of eerily quiet day in Sydney. Yeah, it was. I think that means that my child is going to be the reincarnation of Christ, I assume. But yeah, the other thing, I guess, I don't know how frank to be in my disclosures, but I may as well be lots. The other thing is, you think to yourself, okay, I've got to go up and wank basically into a pot, but like most wanks I've had in my life, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I couldn't even remember them 20 minutes after I had them. And but this one, like if this worked, eggs get fertilized, etc., then I'll be thinking back to this for the rest of my life.
Yes.
So like you start going, well, I've got to be quite selective here. I don't want to just think about any old filth. And
this is going to be my child.
Yeah, exactly. What if I look at something kind of depraved or even think of something kind of depraved and then like my child's 21st, I'm going, oh God, I wish I could take that back.
What's going to happen at the 21st, John, is that your child is going to say, oh, my friends were sort of telling funny, lovely stories about their parents, how their parents conceived them, and you go, well, you kind of know that it was a bit different for your mum and me. You know that, Dad went up to Sydney, and then your child will just go, oh, okay, and then you went to the clinic. What did you think about? You must love me so much. So what did you think about? Because it's such a beautiful...
Yeah, just closed my eyes and thought about...
Do you think about Mummy? How much you love Mummy?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, in part.
Yeah, well, I had that. That was one of the tabs I had open. I had a letter
that his 21st.
I had a love.
Even though that particular performer has passed on, I like to think.
I had a .txt file up of a lovely letter that your mum once wrote me on one part of the screen. 6 other tabs, which were also just part of a whole suite that we used to create
rich tapestry.
Rich tapestry on the screen.
So yeah, I started thinking too much about that, and then the day came, and I went to the lab, and I hadn't had anything to eat because it was Good Friday. There was nothing open. There's no breakfast available at the Quest Sydney Airport.
Yeah.
So I asked for. When I got there, I had a fun-sized packet of chips, which for some reason they had available, and I asked for a cup of coffee, and I should post the picture that I took of the cup of coffee that they brought me because it was a big mug that was branded with the sort of IVF get up and had a big picture on it of a sperm going into an egg. And I was thinking like, what? That seems like a joke. Like, what? Can you just give me a normal cup so I can take my mind off this for a second?
You took it from the staff and you looked at the image and then you looked up at them and you said, what's in this?
Exactly. Maybe, can I just actually have a black coffee? That's okay. And anyway, then I went into the room, and it was this awful little, like, brightly lit, very brightly lit, with those kind of fluorescent, unpleasant lights. Now,
you keep having
shout
this
out to
experience.
Monash IVF.
They keep giving you the dodgy room.
In Melbourne, they put some thought into making it kind of, I mean, it was still, you could still tell you're in a medical facility, but it was deliberate that it seemed deliberate that they had like a nice lamp in there that gave out kind of warm, soft light. Whereas this was the same kind of room in which you might give blood. There was really no allowance for the fact that you were doing something that might require a bit of atmospherics. And first of all, I thought, okay, I'll put my bag down in the room. Then I thought I better go to the bathroom first. On the way, I passed this big, burly Sydney tradie who was walking around the hallway for some reason. And then I went to the toilet, and the tradie's colleague was in one of the stalls, and he was stinking the place out doing a big dump. And so I thought, well, that's not helping to put me in the mood. I was washing my hands, and he came lumbering out of the stall and said, good morning. So I thought, well, I'll just try and put that out of my brain. I mean, the thing that someone said to me, shout out to my friend Kat, who I'm not sure if she is a loyal listener, unfortunately, but she said, you know, you kind of, these processes really make you think about the disparity between sex and babies, essentially. And they do, you know, these, like, that dissonance is really amped up by the kind of nature of this process. Because on the way to the lab, I'm thinking, like, I was getting a bit, you know, philosophical, thinking about, you know, this could be a big change in my life. This day could be quite momentous. And then you get to the lab and you go, okay, enough of that. Now I have to think about filth. And because big life changes aren't going to help. That's the opposite of being sexually aroused.
That's not a category on Pornhub. Is
that's
big
right.
momentous life.
Unfortunately, family is increasingly a category on Pornhub, but in a different way. But so I go into the stall, and then an alarm goes off, and I could hear people beeping, people walking up and down, staff chatting. It was only a couple of meters from the waiting room. And so you could hear people walking up and down. You could hear these tradies coming in and out with whatever they were doing. And then this alarm went off, which was from some room where they put this like cryogenically frozen eggs, and the gas was coming out of it, which I think was all meant to happen, but it sets off this alarm that tells them how much of some chemicals in the room or whatever. So I could hear that going on and on and on. And eventually I cracked the shits and went out and said, is there anything you can do about that alarm? And I was quite aggrieved, probably because I was also hungry because I hadn't had breakfast. So I said, look, just a bit of feedback. You need to you need to turn that alarm off. And also this room is just totally inappropriate. Like the chair's really uncomfortable. It's really intensely lit, and it's off a very busy hallway. And the nurse just kind of looked at me like, well, what do you want me to do about any of that? I just work here. And so anyway, I went back in, and this is the scene missing part of the story.
Sure.
But let's just say that I didn't win the Perseverance Under Adversity Award in Year 12 for no reason, and I saw it through. Thankfully, I can I can channel all sorts of emotions into the kind of mood that I need to be in to do that. So that's fine. And so I did it, and that was it. And and now, obviously, I'll keep everyone posted to the extent that Jacinta's comfortable with me doing so with the next steps.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll be replaying this part of the episode to my son or daughter one day.
Yeah. I do. I remember you wrote me, John, because this was last week or the week before, and you wrote me and said, I might have to change the podcast record time because this thing's all happening quite suddenly with the eggs have arrived in Sydney, and so I've got to go up there. And I was like, sure, no worries. And then I went, hang on. Do you have to fly? Like, if we just break this down, you're flying to Sydney to have a wank and then get back on the flight and then go home.
Production. Exactly.
You went, yeah.
Afterwards,
yes,
I went,
yes.
Yeah, exactly what happened. Because there's some sort of regulatory issue in Victoria, which means you can't do it in Victoria. You can get prepped here, but then you've got to go up there to where the eggs are.
Yeah, I mean,
and then shout out to Suzette's Creperie. I went to the Rocks afterwards, had a nice breakfast, and went back to the airport and said, "Oh, my flight's not till 4, but can I get on an earlier flight?" And they said yes, thanks to the good people at the ironically named Virgin Airlines, and that was it. I came home, but I did think, that was just such a production. Like, can't I just, if this was Uber rather than a plane, and I could just put my boys in a cold pack and send them up there on the plane.
Yeah, well, this will be drone technology in the future, John. You wouldn't have to, instead of having to go to a sterile, cold room next to a busy hallway in Sydney, you'd be able to just, you'd have the app. And you'd just be like, oh yeah, it probably now suits me. And then the app would say, will you have your deposit ready? And you can go, there'll be selection. It'll be like 2 minutes, 5 minutes. And you go, I reckon probably 6 minutes. And you hit 6 minutes. And then you just hear the pleasant sound. The little drone is out there. The ice-packed drone.
It says, I can see that John, I can see that your sample is not ready. Would you like some assistance?
That would be the other thing, isn't it? Is you'd be like, do you want assistance from there'd be an option. Do you want assistance from the drone? And you'd go, oh, hang on, just let me check. Yeah, probably today I'll have a bit of assistance. And then the drone lands and it comes in with its shoulders slumped and it goes, oh.
They've made it way too intelligent. It's just it's semi-conscious.
Wow, that's great though. I loved that story. I loved when you told me, and I was like, wow, this is. It also
it's pretty other. It
really does make you feel like you're in the future, and it is.
Yeah.
I've said this to you a few times, and also I've mentioned it to friends of mine that are trying to have kids and stuff, and particularly women are obviously much more aware of a lot of how this functions these days. Because I've had people just explain pretty basic IVF stuff to me, or the way that eggs and donors work within the last couple of years, and I was going, what? Like you can just, somebody else can grow your baby, but the entire baby is genetically yours, but then you carry it. And I was going, I feel like I should have known.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I feel like I should have known that is definitely a thing. And there's just all of this technology helping people have babies that I was not as tuned into.
I mean, it's kind of amazing, isn't it, that and surely they'll break this barrier at some point, maybe not too long, but that we still need to cook these things in a person.
Yeah, that's true.
You think like you can sort of do everything in the lab up until a certain point, but then it's got to find a a uterus.
That'll be the next thing I'll miss, is that somebody will go, oh, I got to go pick up my baby from the facility where they grew it. And I'll be like, what?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, yeah, they've been doing this for years, idiot. Nobody carries baby. Didn't you notice that you don't see pregnant women anymore? And I was like, no, I guess I didn't notice.
I guess.
No, you get them all. You get them. You get them from the facility.
Yeah. It's the latest. It's like a home brew kit, essentially. You could get your own little baby kit.
Yeah.
And then you just gotta, what's that thing that they, when they're making bread, they have like a mother yeast.
Yes.
It'll be something like that. And you've got to apply the mother at a certain point.
Man, I'm also just thinking, how lucky are you as a man that all you have to do is like something that doesn't require any type of operation or internal procedure or anything. You just get to go, oh yeah, just give me a couple of minutes and I'll have this sorted for you. Whereas the woman does not have that option of going like, oh yeah, I'll just get me eggs out real quick.
Yeah, exactly. It's an injustice, but not one that I want to concern myself too much with.
You've got to concern yourself with criminal matters, various immigration matters, John. This is not a type of thing you need to worry.
I'm doing my bit. I don't need to think about this issue.
With that,
but thanks to everyone in the DPTM community who reached out during the week and said all the best for your Sydney jizz.
Hundreds and hundreds of emails.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, John, I think that's a great way to end the show. We're at 45 minutes, which is a real perfect time, I think. And you sent your lovely email out this week to everybody. Anybody who's not receiving the Don't Praise the Machine email, you're going to want to go to dptm.org right now and pop your email address in there so that you get John's weekly newsletter. He was asking in a poll which type of merch you might want, because we're going to do a merch drop real soon.
Yeah, after this, actually, I'm going to go and have a look at the latest results.
Yeah.
I checked in shortly after sending out the newsletter, and it was a dead heat. I'm not going to reveal the results, but it's going to be a close one. Is it going to be the DPTM leggings, or is it going to be the DPTM branded rugs? What kind of merch are we going to have?
DPTM, DPTM. You had socks, you had keychain.
Socks, keychains, tote bags, caps, tees.
Caps and tees. And also anybody who listens to us on
decals.
Spotify, I found this new feature on Spotify that I've been ignoring where I can do various things to our podcast on Spotify. And one of them was I can run a poll. So I just took a lot of John's options from the merch poll. So if you are listening to us on Spotify, you may have already seen it already, but you should be able to click right now on one of the options. Take a look down at your phone and go, oh, look, I can choose cap or tee or keychain. Just give a little clickaroo. And John, next week, you might even be coming in hot and strong like I am with my DSLR. So by next week, we might both look like
we're in the future.
We might both look like we're in the Twitch future. I actually used a before and after, a picture of myself as one of my first LinkedIn posts last week to say,
oh, cool.
Hey, everybody. My name is Alexander Holland, and I know that growing a podcast can be real difficult, but you got to go to video these days because it's very difficult to get any discoverability unless you do. And then I did a little before and after pic of the first podcast that we did by video when we used just our mobile phones. And I said in my LinkedIn post, if you're starting a podcast, I think a perfect way to do it is with your mobile phone, because you likely have all of the gear that you need to get started, to see how it feels, to do a test and see if you love it. And then at some point, if you want to upgrade, just reach out to Alexander Holland and I'll give you my full kit list. And so
you could be like a retailer selling it at unjustified markup.
Yeah, I should have. It's funny, actually. I wonder if I can load. I assume I can, or maybe I can't. I wonder if I can load LinkedIn with affiliate links, because you can do that with everything on YouTube. On YouTube, anytime anybody is mentioning any product, or 9 times out of 10, if you look in the comments, they've got affiliate links. So if for example, if they're selling a camera, they're saying, "Oh, this is a great camera to use for your next YouTube video," and then they'll be quite upfront about it. A lot of them, and they just say, "Look, if you click the link in the description, you pay the same amount as you would if you just went direct to Amazon, but I get a little bit of cut as an affiliate." So yeah, maybe I'll just load up my LinkedIn with hundreds and hundreds of affiliate links to cheap poorly made products. Cool. Well, I want to say thank you so much for being my pod co-host again this week, John, for the 156th
Pleasure.
time. I did like that intro. I think I should use that again. I really did. I was quite fond of the number one tenured professor of podcasting down there in Melbourne, Australia, and then pretending that you people call you Professor Junior Boost, and that you're sort of a professor at the University of Podcasting of Melbourne.
I wish. Bloody wish.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening to episode number 156 of Don't Praise the Machine. My name has been Alexander Holland, as always, down there in Melbourne, Australia. He's got a big one called
John Maloney.
Thank you so much, everybody, and we can't wait to see you next week.
The podcast.